Caitlin Clark didn't just return to Team USA camp after months away from the game. The moment she stepped on the floor, the entire tone of the gym shifted. What was supposed to be a competitive tryout, a tight battle for spots, roles, and minutes, quickly turned into something far more uncomfortable for everyone else involved. Because Clark wasn't easing her way back in. She was setting the pace, controlling the rhythm, and quietly re-establishing herself as the center of gravity. You could see it immediately. The confidence, the movement, the way teammates naturally gravitated toward her without being told. This wasn't about flashy shots or loud celebrations. It was about control, about knowing exactly when to push, when to slow things down, and how to bend the entire floor to your will. Coaches noticed, players noticed, cameras definitely noticed. And that's where the separation began. Because while others were trying to prove they belonged, Clark was already operating like someone who never left. The contrast wasn't just talent, it was fit. It was command. It was the difference between competing for a role and quietly claiming it. But the real shock came when the rust never showed, and the gap started widening fast. Caitlin Clark walked into Team USA camp carrying 5 months of silence behind her. No games, no box scores, no nightly highlights to remind people who she was. Instead, there were questions. Quiet ones at first, then louder as time passed. Was her body really back? Had the injuries taken something from her? Could she still move the same way against the best players in the world? Every eye in the gym was locked on her from the first drill. Cameras followed her warm-up. Coaches leaned in a little closer. Teammates watched her first few touches the way players always do when someone is returning from a long layoff. Those opening minutes mattered more than anything else. And at first there was a hint of nerves. Clark admitted later she felt it. The ball hadn't been in her hands in a competitive setting for months, and everyone in the building knew what was at stake. Then the warm-up ended. And just like that, the hesitation disappeared. Her movement looked clean. No stiffness. No favoring one side. The first burst down the floor erased weeks of speculation. She changed directions, smoothly stopped on a dime, and flowed into her shooting motion like time had never passed. The confidence came back instantly, not forced, not rushed, just natural. The same rhythm, the same calm control. What stood out most wasn't even the shots. It was the tempo. Clark moved with purpose, reading the floor a step ahead, making decisions early instead of reacting late. She wasn't testing her body. She was trusting it. That trust spread quickly. Teammates started cutting harder. Defenders picked her up earlier. The gym felt different. And once she started pushing pace, coaches realized this wasn't a return at all. To most fans, Kara Lawson's post-practice comment sounded simple. She looked good on both ends. 8 words. Calm delivery. No dramatic praise. But inside a Team USA gym, that kind of statement carries weight. Coaches at this level don't exaggerate, especially not during camp. They choose their words carefully, and when they say someone looked good, it usually means far more than it sounds. Sue Bird's reaction said even more. She didn't need to make a bold proclamation or hype up the moment. Her body language told the story. The nods, the small smile, the way she stayed locked in whenever Clark initiated the offense. Bird has seen every version of elite basketball imaginable, and when something stands out to her, it's never accidental. She was watching someone who didn't look like she was finding her way back. She looked like she already belonged at the center of the group. The biggest signal came from Clark's speed. Not straight line speed, but the burst. The first step. The way she turned the corner without hesitation. Injuries often steal that fraction of a second even after a player is cleared. But Clark had it. When she exploded off a handoff and forced the defense to collapse, coaches didn't need medical reports or minutes restrictions to know the answer. Her body was responding exactly the way it used to. You could see the certainty spread across the staff. Less note-taking, fewer whispers, more relaxed posture. The evaluation phase ended early. They weren't asking if she could play at this level anymore. They were already imagining where she fit and, more importantly, who fit around her. And then one sequence on the floor made the decision feel inevitable. It didn't take long for everyone in the gym to see it. The connection between Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston wasn't something being built from scratch. It was already there waiting to resurface. From their first shared reps, the timing felt natural, almost automatic. No hesitation, no second guessing, just reads made before defenders could even react. Clark didn't need to look for Boston. She knew where she would be. When Boston sealed inside, the pass arrived at the exact moment the lane opened. When she rolled hard to the rim, Clark led her into space instead of forcing her to adjust. These weren't highlight passes meant to impress. They were efficient, precise, and devastating in how easy they made the game look. Angles that other guards didn't see became obvious to Clark, and Boston trusted every delivery without breaking stride. That level of anticipation usually takes weeks, sometimes months, in a camp environment like this. Players have different habits, different rhythms, different expectations. But Clark and Boston operated like they were continuing a conversation that had never stopped. Their shared season experience showed up in subtle ways: the early cuts, the perfectly timed screens, the quick glances that replaced verbal communication. Coaches noticed immediately. They stopped watching individual drills and started watching outcomes. Possessions with Clark and Boston looked organized, balanced, dangerous. Instead of testing lineups, the staff began observing how others fit around them. That's a critical shift. It meant the evaluation was no longer about potential. It was about optimization. What stood out most was how quickly the gym adjusted. Teammates ran the floor harder. Defenders collapsed sooner. Everyone reacted to the gravity those two created together. That's when it became clear this wasn't an experiment being tested. It was a core revealing itself in real time. And that chemistry quietly exposed who didn't fit the same system. As camp settled into its rhythm, the contrast became impossible to ignore. Most players were still in audition mode. You could feel it in the way they attacked possessions, hunted shots, or tried to make something happen on every touch. That's normal in an environment like this. Roster spots are limited. Minutes are scarce. Everyone wants to be seen. Caitlin Clark was operating on a completely different level. She wasn't trying to stand out. She was organizing, directing traffic, reading the floor 2 steps ahead, and making choices that simplified the game for everyone else. When she pushed the ball, it wasn't reckless. It was purposeful. When she slowed things down, it wasn't passive. It was control. She didn't force shots to remind anyone who she was. She let the game come to her and bent it quietly in her favor. That's the difference between auditioning and leading. One is about proving something. The other is about setting a standard. Teammates felt it immediately. Cuts became sharper. Screens came earlier. Players trusted that if they moved with intention, Clark would find them. And she did, over and over. The offense flowed better when she was involved, not because she dominated the ball, but because she dominated the decision-making. Every possession felt calmer, more efficient, more dangerous. Coaches stopped tracking box score moments and started watching impact. Who made the game easier? Who raised the floor for everyone else? Clark answered those questions without saying a word. Her presence reduced chaos. Her reads eliminated wasted movement. That kind of influence doesn't show up on a stat sheet, but at this level, it's unmistakable. And as that clarity set in, something else happened. The spotlight narrowed. The competition that once felt wide open started to shrink. Because when one player clearly elevates the group, the margin for everyone else disappears fast. That's when one name started slipping out of the spotlight. Angel Reese's strengths were never a mystery. The rebounding, the effort, the physical presence inside. Those things still showed up at camp, just like they always have. Reese plays with intensity, attacks the glass hard, and brings an edge that coaches value in specific situations. On paper, that should matter in any competitive environment. But Team USA isn't built on paper. It's built on systems. And the system that began forming at camp didn't revolve around post-heavy possessions or extended half-court battles. It revolved around pace, space, quick decisions, ball movement that punished even the smallest defensive mistake. That shift didn't happen because anyone decided it should. It happened because Caitlin Clark naturally pulled the game in that direction. As Clark took more control, the floor changed. Offense flowed faster. Guards pushed earlier. Bigs were asked to run the screen and finish quickly instead of setting up deep post position. In that environment, Reese's offensive impact quietly shrank. Not because she stopped trying, but because the game wasn't slowing down for her anymore. There were fewer moments to operate inside. Fewer possessions where physicality alone could tilt the outcome. The contrast became clearer with each rotation. When Clark was on the floor, the ball moved before defenses could load up. Lanes opened and closed in seconds. Players who thrived off timing and anticipation benefited. Players who needed the game to settle didn't. Reese found herself fighting for space that disappeared almost as soon as it appeared. And the more Clark controlled tempo, the more defined roles became. Reese wasn't being pushed out. She was being boxed in, relegated to rebounding defense and energy plays rather than offensive focal points. At Team USA level, that difference matters. Stars become specialists quickly when the system demands it. That's what made this shift so uncomfortable. It wasn't about effort. It wasn't about want. It was about fit. And fit doesn't argue back. And it wasn't personal, it was structural. What made Caitlin Clark truly dangerous at camp had nothing to do with whether her shots were falling. There were stretches where the ball didn't go in. That didn't matter. Defenses never relaxed. They couldn't. The moment Clark crossed half court, defenders picked her up early, shading toward her range, hesitant to help even for a split second. That kind of attention doesn't fade just because a shot rims out. It's earned over time, and Clark brought it with her into every possession. That gravity changed everything. When defenders stayed attached to Clark, space appeared elsewhere instantly. Driving lanes opened. Weak side defenders hesitated just long enough. Bigs slipped free on rolls. Wings found themselves open without having to force separation. Clark didn't need to score to tilt the floor. Her presence did the work for her. Teammates felt it too. They ran harder in transition because they trusted the ball would find them if they got open. Cuts were sharper. Spacing improved. Movement had purpose. Playing with Clark wasn't about waiting your turn. It was about staying ready. One step late and the opportunity was gone. One well-timed cut and you were rewarded. That's the difference between a scorer and a controller. Clark read defenses in real time, manipulating help coverage without ever touching the ball. She pulled defenders out of position, forced rotations, and created advantages that showed up 2 passes later. Those are the details coaches obsess over because they translate at the highest level. This wasn't dominance measured by points or highlights. It was dominance measured by influence. Every lineup with Clark felt more organized, more dangerous, more intentional. She raised the floor of the group simply by being on it. And once that became clear, the conversation shifted. This camp wasn't about who could score the most or rebound the hardest. It was about who could shape the game. That's when the future of Team USA came into focus. This camp wasn't just another evaluation. It marked the beginning of a new Olympic cycle, the moment where USA basketball starts deciding not just who makes the next roster, but who defines the era that follows. Those transitions are rarely announced. They happen quietly through trust, responsibility, and who the organization naturally gravitates toward when it matters most. Caitlin Clark fit that moment perfectly. She brought youth without recklessness, confidence without entitlement. The talent was obvious, but what stood out was how seamlessly she aligned with championship expectations. There was no sense of her trying to force her presence. She understood the standards, respected them, and still managed to elevate the entire environment. That balance is rare, especially in a setting filled with elite competitors. Sue Bird's praise reflected that reality. It wasn't about one practice or one hot stretch. It was about reliability, about seeing someone handle adversity, stay engaged during injury rehab, and return without needing to prove anything through ego. Clark didn't disappear when she was sidelined. She stayed connected. She learned. She supported. Those things matter deeply to an organization that values continuity as much as talent. When Clark returned healthy, she didn't just pick up where she left off. She looked more composed, more aware, like someone who understood her role in something bigger than herself. Coaches noticed it in the way she communicated. Teammates felt it in how she directed the floor. It wasn't loud leadership, it was steady, calming, and effective. That's how torches are passed in programs like this. Not through announcements or headlines, but through moments where everyone silently agrees, this is the one. Clark didn't demand that role. She earned it by fitting the present and the future at the same time. And suddenly, this camp meant far more than one roster. By the final days of camp, it was clear this was never a traditional roster battle. Caitlin Clark wasn't fighting for a spot. She was shaping the environment everyone else had to adapt to. That distinction matters. At this level, talent is assumed. What coaches are really evaluating is direction, what kind of team they're building, and who can carry that vision forward. Clark made that choice easy. Lineups with her looked cleaner. Decisions came faster. The game simplified instead of tightening up. Coaches weren't asking whether she fit. They were asking how to build around her. That's the moment a player stops being evaluated and starts being entrusted. In that shift, roles became unavoidable. Angel Reese didn't disappear, but her position changed. She became an option, a situational piece rather than a focal point. Her contributions narrowed to specific tasks, while Clark's expanded to everything. Ball control, tempo, spacing, leadership. That's how hierarchies form at the highest level, not through announcements, but through usage and influence. The reset happened in real time. Possessions flowed through Clark. Teammates adjusted instinctively. Defensive schemes bent around her presence. The staff responded by watching outcomes instead of debating hypotheticals. The system was revealing itself, and Clark was at the center of it. That's why this camp felt definitive. Not dramatic, definitive. It answered questions that had lingered since her injury, and it reframed conversations that were never going to be decided by effort alone. Some players fit the direction, some didn't. That's how elite programs evolve. By the end, the message was clear without anyone needing to say it out loud. This wasn't about earning a jersey. It was about defining what Team USA would look like moving forward. Which leads to the real takeaway from this camp. By the time camp wrapped up, there was nothing left to debate. Caitlin Clark answered every lingering question in one setting against the highest level of competition available. The health concerns faded. The rust narrative collapsed. What remained was a player who looked whole again, physically, mentally, and competitively, and fully ready to lead. Her return wasn't loud, but it was undeniable. Leadership showed up in the way she organized the floor. Control showed up in the pace she dictated. Dominance showed up not through volume scoring, but through influence. Every lineup felt more stable with her in it. Every possession felt more intentional. Those are the traits programs build around, especially when they're planning years ahead instead of weeks. This was never about embarrassing anyone or singling out individuals. It was about clarity, about understanding who fits the direction Team USA is moving toward and who naturally becomes part of that structure. Roles became defined. The hierarchy settled itself without confrontation or commentary. That's how elite teams evolve. With this camp, Team USA didn't just identify a starter or lock in a roster. They identified a center of gravity, someone the offense bends around, someone teammates trust instinctively, someone coaches believe in long-term. Caitlin Clark didn't just come back, she claimed her place. And with that, the gap became official.